How about now? That should be better. Sorry about that. I had this little guy, microphone transmitter, had turned itself off. So now that's on, so you should be all right now. You should be good. Just give me a little shout now, but that should be all perfectly all right. All right. What I was saying was welcome to the, well, technically not the first, but the second live stream of 2024, as we did the same thing this morning. Today is just a little bit of a smorgasbord of various editing things thrown together. Some new things, some old things, when to make the best choices, and so on and so forth. So, I've said that all again. If you're on YouTube and LinkedIn, if you want to ask a question, you can just put that in the comments and that will come straight through to me. If you're in our live streaming room, you can ask a question by going into the Q&A tab. If you want to chat, you can of course use the chat tab as well, but the Q&A tab just helps for Marianne, oh, and Helen is here as well, to answer some of the questions as well. All right. Let's get started. Sorry for that delay and technical screw up on my part. All right, so we've got a bunch of images here. We're not going to have time to edit all of them. Just to explain what we've got, I'm going to start off with this one as it covers a couple of new things, old things. This shot down at the bottom here was something I took on my iPhone, weirdly, in Madrid, and all of us are carrying phones, whether that's iPhones, Android phones, doesn't matter, and using them a lot more for our photography. And there was a little interesting, at least I thought it was interesting thing came up about shooting into a mobile phone and how you can best account for that in Capture One. A few questions came up about portrait editing this morning, so that's why this one is here, and we shall see how much time we have for everything else. All right, so let's start with this one. The reason why I opened this one is that I just happened to be filing through images the other day and noticed this one. It's not shot by me, but my buddy Kish, F35, I think, plain nerds, you can correct me, noticed it was pretty dirty. And if you hadn't figured it out or seen it, if you're running the latest version of Capture One, you can see that the dust removal tools had an update, and this has now got an automatic remove dust button. So if you're presented with a dirty image like this, and this one probably looks worse because it's shot at f/22. So if you shoot at smaller apertures, it's highly likely you're going to see a lot more filth and dirt on the sensor itself. Sensors are getting better, or cameras are getting better at cleaning themselves, but there is an occasion, for whatever reason, wet day like this, could have been changing a lens, moisture in the camera, and then you end up in a situation like this. So all you need to do now is hit this button, remove dust. Capture One will scan the image, find the dust spots, and try to remove as many as possible. Now, if you've still got these little kind of bigger chunks like troublesome hairs and things, you can grab the very reliable and long-standing healing brush and just take those out. So if we just get rid of a few of those nastier ones, I think there's only 2 or 3, probably one over here. Let's get rid of that. One there, and job done. So that's a lot quicker than manually blasting all that dust if you want to. You can still use a manual cursor tool if you wish. Difference between dust and spots: dust is dirt on the sensor, spot is something on the object itself. But generally I think you should find, if we look at the before and after of this, does a pretty nice job of getting rid of all those nasty dusts and spots. You can do that on a batch as well, so if you select a bunch of pictures you can remove dust in one hit. So big time saver. If you haven't noticed it, or you've removed the dust removal tool, just right click and you can add it into any tool tab, like any other tool as an example. All right, next to edit on this picture. So I thought I'd edit this one. Something I did over the holidays was to find some old images and just see what kind of different things I could do with them. Let's just get rid of that. That I didn't do before on newer versions of Capture One. So this shot actually looks pretty good out of camera. but we can actually do a few things to make it a little bit more interesting. So first of all, hitting C on my keyboard to get the crop tool active. I'm going to crop in a little bit. Also, something else you might have discovered, and if you haven't found this preference and you've been a bit frustrated by it, in the crop section, you've got two different aspect ratio behavior. So global aspect ratio and variant aspect ratio. I'm maybe a little bit weird in that I never tend to crop to specific aspect ratios. I'm always unconstrained. So if I set my ratio here, and all I'm doing is right clicking with the crop cursor tool. So if I set my ratio to unconstrained, it's going to be the same on any image that I open up. And when I start to crop, it will just give me freehand cropping. If you prefer to crop to a specific aspect ratio, then you can, or you always tend to pick an aspect ratio before you start cropping. I rarely do that. Then you might prefer to have the other setting, which is variant aspect ratio. And by default, the crop aspect ratio will be set to the original dimensions of the image, or whatever the original aspect ratio is. But as I said, I prefer to go unconstrained. So if you haven't found that option, then go for that in the preferences. So if you're always finding it's on the original aspect ratio, that's why. All right. So looking at this picture, we spoke a little bit about the very last live stream I did about what order I tend to do things in. For me, there is no particular order. What I would tend to do on this kind of shot is crop, as you saw, get rid of the dust because I would find that very distracting. Then I would start to edit. So looking at this picture, if we ignore what we're looking at, we can see the histogram up in the top left. We could probably think, without even looking at the picture, this is a little bit underexposed. So if we were to bump it up to what would be the correct exposure, I find that I actually preferred it looking a bit dark and moody and sinister and everything. So I would tend to ignore, if you like, the correct adjustments, which would be this, and actually go for something which is generally a little bit more on the dark and moody side. I think that's absolutely fine. So personally, my personal preference would be something like this. In terms of the sky, if we think of our original sky, it looks more like this with all the dirt. The only thing that I might do is a very quick, if we make ourselves a new layer and then let the AI intelligence just pick out the sky. So if I grab that, then I'll pull my highlights down a little bit on the sky, maybe add a touch of clarity, if I can find it, and leave it at that, just so there's a little bit of a hint of the clouds and structure, you know, going on in the background as well. I don't want to overdo the clarity, because if I do it too much, we're going to end up with a halo or the beginnings of a halo around the aircraft, which I don't think will look super nice. So if we turn that layer off, you can see before and after, just a slight change in the density. Now, something which I've embraced a lot is style brushes. And what I've done is I've made my own tool tab specifically for style brushes, because otherwise I find that this part of the interface gets too cluttered. A second thing that I've done, now that this tool is growing, you know, the interface, because there's more options, is getting a little bit bigger. I prefer to set this to medium size, and that means I've got better visibility of my layers, so I'm not having to scroll up and down to find the different layers. So if we set that to medium size, like so, then it just gives me at least 4 or 5 layers before I need to scroll up and down. Typically, I'm not using any more than that. You can make it even bigger if you wish, but then it takes up even more space. And then underneath my custom tool tab, I've just got my style brushes. So when they're expanded out, I've got a nice tool tab which just deals with this. If you want to make your own custom tool tab, super easy, right click anywhere up here and say add custom tool tab, like so. Okay, so what I want to do with this, because I don't want to pile in too much contrast on the image itself, I want to do a bit of good old traditional dodging and burning. And that tends to accentuate the light which is already falling on it and darken down the shadows where there is no light. Now, rather than going through the process of making layers, applying the adjustments and so forth, it's just way easier and faster to use a style brush. So if you haven't done that, then start. So I'm going to choose the Dodge Brighten style brush. Immediately my cursor tool changes to the brush cursor tool. It's set up with the adjustments that fit well for this particular layer, and then as soon as I start brushing on the image, my Dodge layer is created, Dodge Brighten number 1, and then I can start to work on the picture. So I'm just going to give this a few swipes just to kind of brighten this area like so, and stop there. Now if you turn this on and off, then you'll see before and after like so. Don't forget you can moderate your opacity. If you've gone too far, you can just bring that down a little bit rather than having to go back and play with adjustments or anything like that. Now to adjust your brush quickly, because we're all about working efficiently these days, with your brush here, now this is going to look a bit jerky on the live transmission. The streaming software does not like how the cursor behaves in this particular fact and seems to have trouble showing it smoothly. No idea why. But if you're on a Mac, PC we'll come to in a second, Control Option, drag left and drag right to make the brush bigger and smaller. Go up and down to change the hardness, whether you want that to be softer or harder like so. So left and right to change the size, up and down to change the hardness. So if I wanted to make my brush a little bit smaller and a bit softer, then I can just very easily do that. If you're on a PC, same 2 buttons, or it's looking at my PC keyboard, Control Alt, I think. Just try it. If not, it's on the support site. And then right click with your mouse or pen, and then you'll be able to adjust. On the Mac, you don't need to right click. It's just the same. Another little shortcut, it might be hard to see, but if I put the cursor tool on this sort of slightly darker fin here, you'll see there's a little plus in the middle of it. So that means obviously it's our brush. What you can do now to quickly go to the erase tool is to hold down your Option key. So you see if I press Option or Alt, then you will see like so that it's now quickly changing to the erase brush. And if you do one further thing, which is to right click and make sure this box is ticked, eraser with brush, that means when you flick between brushing and erasing, it'll be exactly the same settings. So if I just want to take out a little bit of what I've done in the background here, then I can easily brush like so. So that means you don't have to go and tweak or change the brush settings. It's erasing exactly the same as it's brushing. So if we turn that layer off, you can see before and after, like so. I'll do the same. I will grab my burn tool and I'm gonna just darken this area a little bit. And then along the bottom, just darken those areas and a bit around the nose here. If I go back to my Dodge layer, it will automatically remember my brush size and settings. So if I just want to brighten the tip of the nose there and go back to the burn and then do a little bit more, then it's very easy to do so. So using the Option key, using those 2 shortcut keys, making sure your, your eraser is linked with your brush and your brush is linked with your layer. So that means as I flick between those layers, my brush changes as well. So if we just Option click on the reset button, you'll see before and after, like so. Nothing crazy, just kind of accentuating what was there. Now the last thing that I might want to do is do something with this canopy. If we zoom in close, it's got some nice raindrops on it. If I print this, that detail is going to look pretty nice. It's the only bit of color in the image really. The rest of it is kind of cool toned, monochromatic. I don't think I need to do anything on a layer with regards to color. So what I can do is just pick the canopy, kind of a warmy orangey thing going on, and then I can bump up the saturation and maybe make that a bit darker, like so. So just to give a little splash of color in there. What I could do, because of sharpness and this is a little bit hazy, let's try it. Let's throw in one final layer, grab my AI select brush, hover over the canopy itself, so I can either find a spot where the AI model picks all of it up, or I can draw a box around it like so, and then that will give me a nice mask just on the canopy itself. And as it's a little bit on the flat side, I'm going to add a bit of extra clarity into that. And also let's, as there's some nice raindrops on there, add a bit of structure like so. Job done. So not a dramatic edit, but if we look at before and after, it was pretty dirty and a bit flat. And then now we've got this nice light play going on, a little bit cleaner, and so on and so forth. So cool. Let's check for your questions. Very useful information. Glad you think so. Let's hope the rest of it is useful as well. Helen and Marianne are doing a cracking job answering all your questions there. Farana says, is this suitable for a beginner? Yeah, definitely. Don't worry if you're new. I actually ran a poll this morning to see the split of new versus old users, and we had everyone from using it to 2 years plus to 1 month. So it's totally fine. So Lucas was asking, can you put dust removal on a layer? I don't actually know, but Mariana says no, you can't. So there we go. So dust removal is a global adjustment in that respect. Great. I think that's it. Would AI background do this? I don't know what Bill If was asking about the dust removal. Yeah, so it's simply automated, Bill. So all you need to do is say remove dust, and that's it, job done. So yes, it might miss a couple, but as you saw for those more, hair-shaped things, it's easy to just then use the good old healing brush like so. All right, let's look at something else. So yes, JD, who I saw asked earlier, am I going to use this picture? Yes, I will, mostly because of a few questions that came up this morning. Now, interestingly, I think this is interesting. Forgive me if you don't, but I was in Madrid meeting my colleague Alex, who you might have seen on a couple of live streams. And as usual, wandering through the streets, I have my aspirations of being a street photographer and failing, and took this picture on the street. Not a great photograph, because I always seem to screw up lining things up, where I think it's square in the camera, but it's not. But to be fair, from a phone camera, it's pretty impressive detail-wise what comes out of them these days. Especially like the fine detail like so, when you think it's like a little tiny lens, and it's resolving that kind of detail. A bit frightening, really. But how can we polish this picture a little bit? And it also, I had a discussion with one of our developers about DNG files and how they're handled from Capture One, not just from iPhones, but from any newer smartphone with a decent camera that's producing DNG files that has the tone mapped option. So first of all, let's fix my horrible framing. And this is also interesting in terms of older wobbly buildings, how that you can start with an auto result but refine it if it doesn't quite work out. So if I choose my 4-way option here, horizontals and verticals, and say auto, you'll see the lines which Capture One has picked out. So it's using this wall as a reference, this piece of concrete at the top, and also this kind of vertical line of the window here. So in theory, that should work out pretty nice. But when I looked at my full image, and let's just fix the crop actually. So let's just crop this a bit more how I probably would, like so. It doesn't look quite right, mostly because even though this part is straight, if you like, this bit of the wall, as it's an older building and so on, isn't actually that straight. And what I kind of want is this aperture to be the square bit. So it's pretty easy to fix. If I go back to the Keystone guides, and then I'm just going to change it to run off kind of this point, so I've got the top. This wall is fine, and then otherwise I'm going to drop it to there and make sure it's straight along this bit. So now that should square up a little bit better, just enough so that it kind of fixes this part, and now this is my square section like so. So I feel that's better, even though this wall is running, or sorry, this line of bricks is kind of running up a bit. The bit I'm focused on is this aperture here, and I might just tweak the rotation a couple of points, so it's something like that. Okay, so this is how it looks out of camera in terms of exposure. I haven't done anything else. Looks pretty good, right? So if we look at the base characteristics and show you what's going on here. So it's a DNG file ICC profile, and it's been tone mapped as well. So what does that mean? So when you take a picture with iPhone or an Android smartphone, as well as the actual raw file, you've got a tone map as well, which helps to almost like flatten the dynamic range. And what the camera actually exposed it like looks like that. So it's heavily underexposed it in a bid to try and save the highlights here, like so. So this is actually the exposure, the true raw file exposure of this picture. So it's kind of screwed it up a little bit actually. It's gone too dark, I would say. So if we go back to tone mapped, actually looks pretty good. But for reasons that I don't quite understand, and even after a long conversation with one of our developers who's much more intelligent than me and understands these things, what I found was that I had some limitations in editing because the tone mapping has pulled the raw file around so much already. We're kind of hitting some of those limitations. So I wanted to pull the highlights down a little bit, but I couldn't do it with the highlight tool. It has very little effect, but I can, you know, pull the curves down a touch like so, and then get some of my highlights back in the background. But just be aware, you might find, so let's actually clone this image. Just going to clone this so that I've still got my keystone adjustments. Reset my curve tool. Let's go back to the DNG standard. So I actually felt with this picture I could have more control if I just went for the kind of crappy, you know, start point. So if I bring up my brightness and the exposure a little bit and bump up my shadows, I'm kind of almost where I want to be without that tone mapping. And then I've got a little bit more, you know, wiggle room in my highlights as well, because I didn't want the door frame to get that bright as well. So if you do a lot with your smartphone, I'm doing, you know, even more just because it's the camera you have, and I'm not carrying my mirrorless everywhere with me. Then if you struggle, just have a look between the difference between tone mapped and DNG standard. Now the third thing, which I found interesting, was that we can mitigate this. Just need to open up Capture One Mobile. So if you don't have Capture One Mobile installed on your phone, you can give it a try, or if you have the all-in-one subscription, then it comes as part of your package anyway. So I'm not going to give you a full demo on the phone, but you'll see up in the top right-hand corner, there is a little camera icon, and then you can shoot directly using Capture One Mobile. And if you do that, we can actually do a little bit of extra magic to the raw files. And we've created an ICC profile for the iPhone in particular, and that gets around some of this DNG tone mapping limitations as well. So if you are on Capture One Mobile, just give that a try. So what I should have done when I was shooting this is actually shoot it with Capture One Mobile and give myself a bit more flexibility. We're trying to see if we can engineer our way around not having to use the camera built into Capture One Mobile, but to do some stuff even if you've just shot a DNG file. David says, would a DNG file created by DxO Prime Raw 3 from a Canon CL2 be treated differently? Yes, because it won't have the tone map. As far unless because the Canon CR2 file won't have a tone map. So it will be treated differently. Probably you'll find it's just on DNG standard. You won't get the tone map option, and it would just be DNG file neutral, like so. Got it? Will a dam be added? There has been a dam since Capture One 7, Kamit. So yeah, since Capture One 7, that was when the first catalogues were added, and then it's evolved since then. So dam is already there. All right, let's put this guy back over here. let's pick something else. If I can get to here. Oops, hang on, I'm typing in a box. That explains it. Questions is all good over there. That's nice. Fantastic. All right. What do I want to talk about next? How are we doing for time, first of all? Okay, so we've got 20 odd minutes left and so on and so forth. Let's take this one. We didn't do this morning, but the reason I picked this one out is because we've got, you know, new shiny tools, AI masking and so on and so forth. We've got Magic Brush, which is still an option, and we've got, you know, older legacy tools which have been around since Capture One 12 or whatever. Now, whenever you get a new shiny toy, you're always, I guess, keen to try and use that. But don't forget the tools which exist in the first place. So again, let's just fix the keystone. So if I say auto, like so, that does a nice keystone job of that. Let's fix the cropping. So we've got a bit more of the tower in the background, and tweak my rotation a little bit. By the way, when I rotate, if I want to rotate a small amount, I always tend to use my keyboard. So if I go into the angle and just press the up and down cursor key, I get 0.01 adjustments. If I do shift up and down, like so, then I can get bigger adjustments. So if I just want to tweak the rotation a little bit, I find that a lot easier. All right, so the purpose here was, okay, looking at this picture, it's actually a nice exposure, nice level of sharpness, excuse me, but the sky is a little bit too bright. So as we're used to new shiny things, the immediate reaction is, oh, I could AI mask that or something. Or I could use the Magic Brush or whatever. In actual fact, none of those tools are appropriate for that. Good old gradient mask over here. So fourth cursor in. Let's just bring that down. So if I press M on my keyboard so you can see the mask, we're going to end up with something like that. I'm going to hold down Option on my keyboard to make this fall off a little bit harsher, because I only kind of want it to extend to there. So that's my mask, and then all I'm going to do is bring my exposure and brightness down a bit, throw in perhaps a little bit of clarity just so the buildings pop, and job done, like so. That's all it really needed. I can extend this down a bit probably, and now we've got a better balance between the sky and the background. Now, if I wanted to, you could say, well, actually your tree up here is getting a little bit dark. If I open up the shadows a touch, there we go, because the shadows are sort of targeting this area anyway. They're going to have less of an effect on the sky itself. So if I just click and hold where it says shadow, you can see before and after. So we've darkened the sky down, we've opened up the shadows in the tree a little bit. That's it. Didn't require you to spend hours doing a mask by hand, doing an AI mask, doing a Magic Brush or something like that. It's just a simple, good old, dead basic gradient mask with a couple of adjustments. And remember, your mask doesn't necessarily always have to be super accurate or chopping around something, because in the case of the trees, we can easily fix that with a targeted adjustment. So it doesn't matter if you shoot people, plants, forests, or whatever. The same principles apply with whatever you're doing. So just because you've got the ability to mask well doesn't mean that you have to. And always think about what's being adjusted. I've got to say this again because it has a dam built in. So does Capture One. Capture One has a built-in dam. It has since version 7. Which was about 10 years ago. So no need for you to switch, because you can use the dam that's built into Capture One. So give that a try. As for the rest of this picture, so I just had to answer that because I was confused. As for the rest of this picture, so I wouldn't do a great deal more for this. I would probably add a little bit of clarity just in general for the whole image. I'm a bit worried about how dark that shadow is getting, and we can see that in the histogram as well. So if we just pop open the shadow, maybe the black's a little bit. Guess it's some, yeah, just some fishing things. See, that's just opened that up a little amount. And there we go. Not every single picture needs, you know, a million adjustments and so on and so forth. So you can also edit quickly as well. Nice. Any other questions? Let's see so far. Let's have a look. Arvind, that's a good question actually. How differently does Capture One process Canon RAW versus Canon C RAW, the compressed RAW? Some people think it's better to shoot in Canon C RAW. Would the Capture One output be identical for the two? That is a good question. I haven't extensively looked at it myself, so I couldn't give you an honest answer. But I have a feeling the Canon C RAW, or maybe I'm confusing it with something else. Any Canon users, feel free to chime in, because one of the RAW formats is a bit of a glorified JPEG, but I can't remember if that's on Canon or Nikon. If, of course, you're worried about quality, then always go for at least a lossless compressed RAW, regardless of whatever that is. Regardless of whatever camera that is. But one of the formats I do have a feeling isn't really that particular RAW. Let's see. A few questions have come up. What is DAM? DAM, Digital Asset Management, is the technical term. So meaning, you know, the ability to have a broad overview of all your work like you can in a Capture One catalog with multiple ways to search, filter, categorize, and so on and so forth. So it's just the fancy word for a catalog. Oh, look at that. My colleague who's watching, thanks Christian, Canon RAW and C RAW are practically identical under normal use. There we go. You heard it straight from the developers. So if you do want to use C RAW to save a bit of space on your cards and hard drives, then there you go. I guess like any of these more compressed formats, the more you stretch it, the more likely it is to fall apart. But as Christian says, practically identical under similar use. Kamit, also watching, says C RAW is quite good. I can't see much difference even in images under critical conditions. There you go. So you heard it from the users who are way more experienced than me. Nice one. All right, let's do one final thing. We're going to talk about this shot. Again, also going back to this one, like when should I use new fancy tools and when should I use something simple that just works? You know, a similar thing with this one as well. So just thinking about the background and a couple of different ways that you could mask and change that. So we've got the obvious way and then we've got the older way as well. A question that came up this morning too was talking about like retouching. So how can I retouch in Capture One, which you can't really in the same way that you would want to do in Photoshop. But I would say, what do you want to deliver to Photoshop? What do you want to give yourself the best starting point in terms of retouching? So let's talk about the background first, and then we'll talk about retouching stuff. So this is, I think, straight out of camera, so it's pretty spot on. Exposure, everything, white balance looks great. But let's say fussy client, we want to change the background. We want to make it more saturated, less saturated, whatever. So first of all, we could hit background for our AI masking like so. And that will give us this. Looks pretty nice. If we go to say display grayscale mask, we get that. Got kind of nice refinement around the hair and the edges and so on. So it gives us plenty of scope to be able to then mess around with this. Let's say we want to make it a little bit darker, maybe more saturated, tweak the color and so forth. So that would be the modern way to do it, if you like. So now we've got a exact copy here. Just check it's exact. And let's do it the old way. So we've got our color editor. I'm going to grab our color picker, click on the background. We can turn on view selected color range to see what that has selected. So anything not part of that selection will turn to monochrome. So you'll see if I creep around here, then that's going to include it. So I'm just going to maximize out this wedge to make sure I've caught all the blue. Turn that off, and then hidden in here, if you didn't know it was here, is something called Create Mask Layer from Selection. So if we do that and see what happens. So this will turn that color mask, if I press M on my keyboard, into a mask. Now straight away, you can see it's picked up a little bit of eyeball. If we turn on the grayscale mask, you see it looks like this. First of all, let's fix the eyeball mistakes here. So let's just get rid of that. And then if I zoom in a bit, you can see the mask is a little bit on the crunchy side, right? So if we compare to our other one, so this is the one that we did background mask. This is the one that we did with the color edit like so. So first impression is, wow, that one looks way better. Absolutely, I would agree with you. But how can we improve on this if we wanted to? Because sometimes it's just easier to do a color range selection. So don't forget, we've got a button here that says Refine Mask. So if I click on this, Refine Mask, we can dial in a certain amount, let it do its magic. And there we go, we've now refined that. So what's happened is that where the mask stops, if you like, between the black and the white, then we get a bit of refinement on the edges, so it cleans it up quite nicely. So if I just cancel out of that for a second, let's just bring this down. So you can see it's almost like bleeding into the skin, so that might be a little bit too much. So let's just go for that and say apply. So now, they don't look that far off different, but there's an interesting, so let's look on the right here. Slight interesting difference here. So on the AR one, it's picked up a little bit more of the fuzzies and so on, but there's a little bit of, so the mask looks like this. So it's missed a bit of the background behind the hair, whereas on the color one, because it's color based, it's picked everything up like so. So you've got two different results, but to be honest, if we're looking at, you know, in terms of what we can do in terms of adjustments and so on, the actual end result is not massively different. But I think it's good to know you've got those two options, and then regardless of whether you find a limitation on method A or method B, then you know you've got one to pull it out the bag. Okay, so the question that came up earlier was like retouching and so on. Can you do retouching in Capture One? You can do some basic stuff, but I'd never go ahead and tell you that Capture One is a retouching tool, because it's not. But can we deliver an image to our preferred retouching tool of choice, Affinity Photo, Photoshop or whatever, to be able to do that? And I think yes, certainly you could. So what kind of retouching can you do first of all? Well, you can remove simple blemishes like this, easy enough. So just to get rid of that stuff, I would personally pick, you know, a different point. Things like laughter lines, if I draw kind of along here like so, that works quite nicely. If I draw along here like so, that works quite nicely. So you can do a few, you know, basic stuff like that without too much problems. So what I would also say is that if you are going to do extensive retouching, is that you might not want to deliver the full sharpness of the picture. So we've got, if we look on our image layer, we've got in sharpening the default sharpening for a Phase 1 IQ 100 as an example. So it's 185, 110. Now you might decide that, you know what, I'm going to do sharpening, whatever, retouching in Photoshop, so I'm just going to take all of that off. So now we've got no sharpening on this file whatsoever. I mean, we could have a long conversation about different sharpening techniques, but that's something you could do. If we hit our subject mask now, so let's just do that. Then there's a couple of things that we could do if you wanted to soften the skin. So we've got our subject mask like so. So if we wanted to just restrict this to the face or whatever, I could grab my AI Erase tool. So let's take out all of that first of all. Let's take out that. So we've just got this. Let's take out the hand. So now we've just got skin like so. And finally, we could probably drop the hair out as well. One second. No, I've got the right brush. There we go. So it says preparing AI mask. So now let's just pop the hair out a little bit. Get this in the right spot. So we do that. And then finally, if we want to take the eyes out, we can box around that, we can box around that. And then finally, we can box around the lips as well. Just let it build the mask. Sorry, I was getting ahead of it. Like so. And then we've got, you know, just a feature mask like that, or a reverse feature mask. So people were asking about softening and those kinds of things. You can do some negative clarity, which will just take the edge off a little bit. You can also do some negative structure. I would just be wary though, because you will start to soften other things. So if we just turn this layer on and off, you can see before and after. So if you would want to just erase the eyebrows perhaps, I could just do that manually, just take that out, take this out. And then this way we're doing a little bit of softening, but we're not softening important things like eyes, lips, and so on and so forth. So what you can do, so if we just bring up the defaults, so you can decide, do I want to deliver to Photoshop something on the left, which is already quite sharp, or do I just want to take the edge off it because there's actually no benefit to sharpening skin, if you like. But there is obviously benefit to having nice sharp eyes, lips, and so on and so forth. I'm not a retoucher, I'm not extensively and don't claim to be skilled in that particular area. But this is something you can think about in your workflow as well. What I would recommend is definitely exercising the highly useful skin tone tools. I mean, Alex, the model here, has got pretty awesome skin, so there's not really much we need to do. But if we grab our skin tone tool, if we've got a target skin tone that you're aware of, so let's say I'd want to have this target skin tone. If I drag the hue slider, saturation and lightness to the right, everything within my selection here will get transformed to the picked point. So that was the target skin that I picked. So if I drag hue, saturation, lightness up, you can see that does the overly horrible retouch look for lightness. But if we turn off our subject mask, you can see before and after. So it just does a little bit of color smoothing, evening out, and so on and so forth, and actually takes the highlight down a bit here because we're bringing up the lightness a tiny bit as well. So before and after, like so. If we zoom into 100%, turn this off, turn this back on. So it just gives you a softer start point. But as I said, Capture One has never designed or never claims to be a retouching application, but there are some things you can do in the file to give you that better delivery start point. JD says, I've known Alex for a while. Naturally beautiful people. She needs very little, if any, retouching. Yeah, I mean, she's definitely blessed with good features and skin and so on, and she can look like a million different people as well. It's quite funny. And David says, yeah, too much softening looks plastic and fashion-like. Yeah, I don't like it. Like, as soon as we get to stuff like, doing this kind of thing, I just, you've got to have texture in skin, otherwise it just looks fake and horrible. So all those kinds of things, use with caution, but I definitely wouldn't be adding clarity to a subject's face unless you are kind of in that zone of having character portraits where there's, loads of wrinkles and bad stuff like me, which you want to accentuate. Spock eyebrow. Haven't heard it called that before, but yeah, exactly. There was a question about edit with, which I think I missed earlier. Oh, yes, there is RDM forever. In the color editor, why isn't there a way to reset skin tone and colors in the basic individual without resetting everything? There is, actually, and there's a little help bubble, which I think I've turned off, which tells you. So if we hover over the reset button, oh, I've killed it, I think. I did a bit of a hack, because when you're recording tutorials, help bubbles are really annoying. So I've got a feeling I did a hack with a developer to turn them off. But you'll find if you hover over your reset button, it will give you a little tooltip, and it will say, click this button to reset everything. If we option click, it'll show you before and after. Let's just chuck in a sweater edit. So let's make that, oh, wrong layer, hang on a second. What should we do? Let's just do another quick edit on the base layer. So we've got our blue adjustment. Let's just throw in something for skin tone so that we can say we've got it. So I just do some silly adjustments. So if you do Option click on your keyboard, then it will do a before and after of the whole tool. On the Mac, if you hold Command down and click, it'll just reset that single tab. Okay, so you see advanced is still kicking, skin tone has been reset. So if I do a skin tone adjustment again, and I hold down Command on my keyboard and click on the reset, it will only do the currently visible tab, like so. Now advanced is still good. Basic as well, if I don't know, if I did that and did a Command reset, it would get rid of my basic, but my advanced is still good. So it is possible. It's just one of those undocumented features, but it is there on the help bubble. So I've turned it off because it drives me crazy when I'm recording tutorials, but you'll find if you hover, then you'll see that tooltip. Awesome, it's a really handy feature and good to know that it's there. On the PC, it's slightly different, but if you hover over your reset button, you'll see it. So RDM, there we go. Now the question I was looking for was about round trips, but I can't find it. Oh, there we go. Jeff says, if you have a minute, edit selected always trips me up. What's the best way to edit multiple images at once with the same adjustments? Best way to do that is good old speed edit, smart adjustments. So let's, how much time we got? Okay, we can revisit smart adjustments. So Jeff, this was intended to talk about smart adjustments, but we'll talk about that as well because edit all selected actually comes into play here. So what are smart adjustments? So first of all, we're going to very quickly recap that because it's dead easy. Smart adjustments are a way of using facial recognition. Just checking they're all reset. Yep, facial recognition to even up a series of pictures to have the same exposure and white balance. So it's better to see it rather than try and explain it. So with this picture, I'm gonna just warm it up a touch and we're gonna go a little bit brighter. And I'm gonna say in the Smart Adjustments tool, this is my reference. So now if I go and select a bunch of other pictures, like so, which have faces in it, doesn't matter that there's two of them, then Capture One will find the faces and balance them up to give an appearance like my reference. So now if I say apply, like so, oh, let's just select the original one. Now we've actually got a pretty nice even set of pictures because before they looked like that and then now they look like that. So they've got a much more similar look and feel about them. So Jeff, now you want to do perhaps editing all of them at the same time, or you want to just do a quick tweak of one of them. And this is where this weird and wonderful option comes into play. Edit all selected variants. You can add it to your toolbar as well if you wish. So when it's on, the fast way, Jeff, if you want to edit everything, is to use something called speed edit. So what speed edit does, if you find our keyboard shortcuts, speed edit keys, what it does, it binds some of the most common, useful, popular adjustments to a particular key on the keyboard. And then in this case, I would say on this image here, the highlights are a bit too bright. So how could I quickly adjust the highlights on this image? So if I select this one, Jeff, and hold down A on my keyboard, you can see highlight pops under each of the images like so. So if I click on any of these pictures and drag to the left or drag to the right, it's going to adjust the sliders of each one. Now the same principle for a mouse, or if I go over to my trackpad and do a 2-finger scroll, similar thing, I can adjust up and down like so. What is new in this version of Capture One, the latest, if I tap my spacebar, it goes back to 0, which is super handy. So if you want to do a quick reset, just tap the spacebar. Now in this case, Jeff, we want to just adjust the highlights on this one. So if I turn this off, edit selected, hold down my A key, now I've just got highlights on this one. So if I zoom in a bit and just reset, so I can see, you know, it's a little bit bright there, so I just want to take the highlights down to something like that, which looks better. So before it was like this, but I want to go down, just control those highlights. So now I can just balance everything up like so. Now, Jeff, if you wanted to edit again everything at the same time, we would turn edit selected on. Let's say they're a little bit on the cool side. I want to warm them up. So if I hold down 1 on my keyboard, then you see the Kelvin values underneath. They all vary a little bit because the light is obviously not constant. But if I want to warm them all up by the same amount, then I can just do a quick drag and get them all looking a bit warmer. Nice. So what this button refers to is not all the sliders. So if I, you know, play around with contrast now, you see it's only affecting my primary variant, the one which has the white box around it. So it does not relate to editing sliders unless you are using speed edit. What it does relate to is things like if I had a color tag using a shortcut key. So if I press 7 on my keyboard, they're all going to get green tagged. If I press 9, they're all going to get red tagged, like so. 6, it's going to clear the tag. But if for some reason I just want to tag this one, I can turn this off and press 7 on my keyboard, like so. It also relates to things like, where is it? So if I say rotate right, then it will only do the 1 if this is turned off. If I turn this all on, and I'm going to completely mess up my rotation now and say rotate left, everything's going to get rotated. So let's go adjustments, rotate right, turn this off, this one's highlighted, adjustments, obviously you would do this with the shortcut, Shift Command L, rotate left like so. So it's a really handy little toggle, but Jeff, what you're expecting, which I totally understand why you would, because I did the first time I used Capture One, is that edit selected related to editing sliders, but it does not. Okay, so it relates to things like star rating, color tagging, rotation, exporting, whether you're going to export just the primary or all of them, speed edit, as you saw, which is super useful, and probably a bunch of stuff which I've forgotten as well. Nice. All right, how are we doing for time? That's pretty much it. Just a question which, as I've done this a few times today, as you can see, different variants. So Gordon was asking, with regards to storage management, what additional edits creates additional large file, and what simply creates metadata? Well, nothing really creates a large file. So when I do a new variant or a clone variant, so if I say new variant, all we end up with is just another virtual copy. So there's only one raw file. So if I right click on this and say show in Finder, well, there you go, there it is. So there's the raw file. There's only one of it. There's not 3. There's a tiny bit of additional metadata with regards to, you know, adjustments, but that's just text data. It's kilobytes, so nothing. So yeah, so you can make billions of variants and you're not going to see any impact on your hard drive. The only time where we have an additional file is when you're exporting to a final format, TIFF, JPEG, so on and so forth. What you might not notice in Capture One now, worth having a look here, for your preview generation, Capture One will recommend the size of the preview, and the preview is essentially what we're looking at in Capture One. When you're adjusting, you know, browsing through pictures at speed, we're not having to look at the raw data, we're just picking up the preview file. What's changed is that the way we generate the preview is now way faster and they're much, much smaller. So again, Gordon, you're saving hard drive space, and you can pick for quality or speed. I've gone for speed because, to be honest, I've personally yet to come to a situation where I've seen a quality issue with the preview. The only thing you might want to look out for is like posterization or some graininess on, you know, a finely graduated background, but I have yet to see it. So cool. Last question from Lauren. I can't see the slider during multiple editing. Why is that? Have you got too many pictures up, I wonder? It might be. So you won't see the slider, you'll just see a value if there's a lot. So if there's just a few pictures, whoops, wrong button, then you see the slider. So it could be just dependent on your screen space. But you don't need to see the slider because you don't need to hit the slider. You just drag anywhere on the picture, like so. Spacebar to reset it to 0. Okay? So that is your, mantra for resetting. Okay? So you don't need to see the slider. You can just literally drag back and forth using the method that you wish. You do not need to hit the slider itself. Okay? You will always see the value. So even with a bunch of pictures selected like this, and we do a speed edit, you'll always see the value and the tool that you are adjusting, like so. Cool. Nice one. All right, last thing to mention, wave your camera at the screen. That will show you that page, the live streams page, which you can also find by using that short link, c1_livestreams, or just go to support.captureone.com and you'll find the live stream page pretty quickly. You'll see up in the top right hand corner there's a follow button, so if you're logged in, whenever we put a new live stream up or I add the recording, then you'll get an email notification as well. So do have a look out for what's coming up next week. We've got a headshot session with Peter Hurley and Alex talking about some really cool stuff that you can do with subject background masking if you're shooting headshots, and a few other styles and presets related things too. Nice one. So I think that clears everything up nicely for today. Just checking on questions over here. Sorry if we didn't get to your particular question today. Yeah, Mark was asking, are there any blur options? No, so negative clarity is a kind of a blur, but it's not, it's not what you're looking for, I would think, Mark. So as I said before, just be very wary that Capture One, it's not a retouching tool. It's the best raw converter out there. You can see what you can do, but for those retouching, blurring things, that's when you're moving on to your pixel editor. But who knows? There could be scope to have a decent blur tool in the future. It might be very useful. There we go. Yeah, I think that's it. So thanks for Helen and Marianne for answering questions in the background. There's no way I could do all of that. So thanks to you. Round of applause for them, for everyone watching as well. And thanks everyone for helping each other out as well. That was great with the Canon files and wasn't experienced enough with Canon to know that. And thanks to my colleague Christian for texting me in the background as well. Nice one. Thanks everybody, and hope to see you again soon in a future live stream. Take care. Bye now.